And each one of the 23 campuses in the system participates in COAST and benefits from it. So we cover the open and coastal ocean, coastal zones, which includes bays, estuaries, and beaches, and coastal watersheds to the extent that the organism, material, or process articulates with the coast at some point. So this could be anadromous fish, surface water, groundwater, water quality, land use, even carbon emissions. We don't decide a priori what is and isn't coast per se. It's really up to either faculty members or students, particularly when applying for funds, to articulate how their specific research project or idea is related to the coast if it's not readily apparent. So this comes back to the coastal watershed issues. So we want to cover work in coastal watersheds. I think, as I was saying, it's up to the applicant to demonstrate what the connection is between whatever it is in the coastal watershed and the coast itself. And that's something I think we were, in the very beginning of COAST 9 years ago, we were not real clear on the coastal watershed piece, but I think the leadership team has very clearly made it, stated that they want to cover coastal watersheds, and we're still, and we're very interested to receive projects from students and faculty that address coastal watershed issues that relate to the coast. The other thing I want to stress, particularly because some of our partners here for the panel this afternoon are federal agencies that have jurisdiction beyond just the state of California, so the work is not limited to the state either. In the beginning, we had a pretty strong focus on California. Chancellor Reed said, I want you to serve the state in a way that no one else can. And we have a lot of students and faculty who do work within the boundaries of California because it's logistically easier. But we also have a lot of faculty who either through COAST funding or through other types of funding work along the entire west coast of North America and across the globe. And COAST has funded projects for both faculty members and students outside of California and outside of the United States. So I want to make it clear to everyone here, and hopefully you can communicate this back to your colleagues and your students on your campuses, that the work that COAST supports is not limited to California. So there are, I think, two main principles that guide all of our activities. The first is to advance our knowledge of marine and coastal resources and the processes that affect them. And the second is to inform decision-making in the development of responsible policy. And I want to stress that these statements are extraordinarily carefully worded. We've worked on these over the years. So for example, the first one used to say our knowledge of California's marine and coastal resources. We took that out because we knew that we needed to make it very clear that we would support work that extended beyond the boundaries of California. And I want to go back, I think, to what President Ochoa was saying about the informing decision-making. And we may talk about this later on in the day. And James and I have talked about this a lot. He's helped over the years with understanding, I think, what the difference is between advocating for something, which is not what we want COAST to be doing, but instead we want to help the faculty in the CSU bring their knowledge and their expertise to discussion and debate in Sacramento, in DC, at local community levels, so that we can help provide the best available information for informed decision-making. And that's really the key. If you want to advocate for a certain outcome in your personal life, that's one thing. But I think that COAST is really interested in how can it make its scientific expertise of the CSU available to policy and decision makers at a multitude of levels, so that whatever decisions are made on the best information available. So what I'm going to talk about next reflects these different priorities here that we have. So there's a number of different things we're trying to accomplish, and I'm not going to read these, but these are all part of both, I think, the annual report as well as the draft strategic plan. So one of the ways that we advance knowledge of coastal and marine resources is by providing research support directly to CSU faculty and students. So this year we're on track to provide about $200 in support to CSU faculty members.
$200? Awesome.
Oh, 200,000.
Budget cuts.
$200. Go get them. No, $200,000. So context, COAST's annual budget is around $800,000. Sometimes a little more, a little less, depending on the secure much larger follow-on funding from external organizations. So this year's been a particularly good year. Since July 1st, faculty directly supported by COAST in the past have used the data gathered with COAST support to go out and secure over $2.5 million from extramural funding. What COAST CSU faculty have done in addition to that, that's not necessarily directly related to COAST support itself, is much, much larger. But these are, and one of the things that I think is interesting here is, something we've noted before is that sometimes it takes a long time to see that return on investment. So on average, I would say it's about 36 months from the time COAST makes an award to a faculty member that they secure an external grant or contract. But in some cases, it can be quite a haul, a long-term investment on the part of the faculty to continue applying for extramural funding. They can take years after they receive COAST support, but often we do see pretty significant returns. Another way that we advance our knowledge of coastal and marine resources is also by providing research support directly to students. But it's not just research support. We also provide funds for students for a number of different activities that really help them develop during both their undergraduate and graduate careers. So going to meetings to present the results of their research can often be a really significant experience for them. We also have an undergraduate student research support program that provides hands-on research opportunities funded for students, as well as our summer internship program. You know, both undergraduate research and internships are demonstrated ways to increase student success, and the Chancellor and President Ochoa mentioned the graduation initiative, where we're trying across the entire system to increase the success rate of our students at time to degree attainment. So I think COAST plays a role in this in its own way. I think one of the things that I find interesting is that while these numbers are not huge in the context of the CSU, where we have 400,000 undergraduate students, we know that it's significantly impactful. So in the annual report that you have, there's a quote from a student from Chico who participated in the undergraduate student research support program, who said that when he got his job with Bureau of Land Management, what they told him was that his research experience is what made him stand out among the other applicants. And we've had a number of our interns be hired on by their hosts following the completion of their internship program. So some of these things can be a real help to students when they're trying to join the workforce upon graduation. I think the other reason it's important is 10% of California's workforce is made up of CSU graduates, and a number of our COAST awardees at both the undergraduate and graduate level are going to go on to work in resource management agencies, public service. They might end up being teachers, they could go into industry, and they will take with them the environmental literacy that they gained during their time at the CSU into their career, and that will also help with informed decision making. A lot of times, well, if you've been to COAST meetings before, you know that usually we do campus updates where we go around and every campus gets one slide in 2 minutes to talk about what their campus has been up to. But we decided not to do that this year, and instead I selected a number of topics that I thought would be of particular interest to our panelists from state and federal management agencies. So these are different ecological issues going on that our faculty are working on. The first few slides show faculty that COAST has directly supported. So we have had a number of people through different programs that COAST funds excuse me, address different parts of the sea star wasting disease epidemic in California over the last 4 years. And so they looked at different things such as the organism's response to the virus, how different types of sea stars, so we've got the bat star, the six-armed star, as well as the more quintessential Pisaster, looking at how different types of sea stars are responding to this epidemic, also looking at the impacts on the larger marine communities, and then some of the recovery that's already beginning to occur. We also funded a couple projects that were in response to the oil spill that happened just a little bit less than 2 years ago. So we had faculty who wanted to look at the impact of the oil in the environment on marine mammals, as well as the degradation of the oil over longer time periods. So the oil typically goes through a more rapid biological degradation, but a portion of the oil can exist in the environment for extensive periods of time, months to years, and it changes as it's weathered by both sunlight and oxidation processes. So we funded a couple different studies in direct response to that. And then we had a number of people who were interested in looking at various aspects of El Nino over the last 2 years, looking at how do El Nino processes affect larval connectivity? How do certain populations weather El Nino based on their distribution? That would be the birds in the top right-hand corner. Is San Diego an El Nino ready city? What lessons have been learned and implemented in San Diego in response to prepare for El Nino? The other thing I want to say is this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of things that either COAST has funded or that COAST faculty are doing. So if you don't see your work up here, don't take it personally. There's quite a bit going on. Dr. Brian Tussaud gave me some information about something that Humboldt State is doing to help Northern California fishing communities through funding from NOAA. And so they're working with two different fishing communities in Eureka and Shelter Cove to develop community sustainability plans that involve social, economic, and environmental aspects. And this is important because they're trying to help these fishing communities understand what their future looks like. There are new regulations coming, the fleets are shrinking, and another factor that's interesting that you get from some of the involvement of social scientists here are the fact that members of the fishing community are aging. And so what does that look like for these communities where revenue from fishing is a significant portion of the community's overall economic status? This I thought was interesting. This has been an emerging topic, for a lot of state regulators. What's going on with marine debris and microplastics in particular? So I wanted to point out that we have a number of different faculty, either who are working on this or their students are, throughout the system. And if you don't know, Ed Carpenter actually wrote one of the first papers ever that documented the occurrence of plastics in the ocean a few years ago. And he's at San Francisco State. So I want to go through a couple other areas now where there are far too many faculty to actually list who work on these projects. If I were to try to put the names of the faculty up there who've been involved with marine protected areas, you'd just be looking at a slide full of text. So Ocean Spaces, which is I think set up by Ocean Science Trust, has a really nice website where you can go in and look at all of the projects that were funded in the different regions that California was divided up into as part of the baseline characterization project, and a number of CSU faculty have been partners in those projects. Now what we're looking forward to is the long-term monitoring plan and that implementation, and I think that CSU, with its geographic distribution from San Diego to Humboldt, is well poised to be a significant partner in those efforts to monitor the MPAs and evaluate their effectiveness over the coming decades, because that's the time frame that we're talking about. We also have quite a few faculty who work on the biological impacts of climate change. So we're talking about things like ocean acidification, hypoxia, thermal stress, and how do these abiotic factors affect marine organisms. So there's a number of projects out there that look at these factors, particularly in combination, and how do they affect the organism's biology and ultimately their behavior and their function in the ecosystem. And these are just a couple of the species that faculty are working on, both invertebrates and vertebrates. These are ecologically as well as economically important species in California. We also have people working on the physical impacts of climate change. So with climate change, we're experiencing sea level rise, more frequent storms, coastal erosion. When a beach erodes, it costs quite a bit of money to replenish the sand if a community decides to do that in order to maintain tourism and recreation revenue. We've got a number of faculty working on different types of living shorelines projects along the coast. So this is where instead of maybe using a seawall to protect the coast, you use something like native species, oysters and eelgrass, plant them, and they can actually buffer against impacts from waves and rising tides. And one of the things that COAST funded this year was a beach sustainability index workshop that was run by faculty from Channel Islands and San Francisco State, and brought together people who are experts in this from throughout the state to talk about how to proceed. And Sean Anderson's department. We also have quite a few faculty who've participated in fisheries management in a number of different ways. So working with the fishing fisheries, and also evaluate different fishing practices so that these can be managed most effectively. One of the things that Coast funded a couple years ago, we had something called the Strategic Investment Program that we've only offered once. So these were some of the largest awards that we've made to date, and we made two. One went to this aquaculture group based out of Moss Landing that's working on working with industry and with students to create both partnerships with industry to advance aquaculture technology, but also train students to go into this field. So this is going to become a center, we believe, at the campus level, and then the goal would be to make it actually a CSU level center and make it a resource available to business and regulators throughout the state. So they're the final stages of that and seeking quite a bit of funding from extramural funding sources to get the center fully staffed and operational. And also, another group that we funded, I call the Ecophysiology Group. Lars Tomanek describes it as putting the animal back together. So this goes back to the biological impacts of climate change. So we can look at impacts of climate change. What do they do to an organism at the molecular level? How does that affect the organism's biology? How does it affect its behavior in the environment? What is the organism doing in its environment? What is the population doing? And what is happening to the overall ecosystem function? They also had a workshop, it was last summer, with faculty from throughout the CSU. We have a really impressive group of faculty working on these different topics. And they put in a National Science Foundation Research Coordination Network submission last summer and didn't get it, but had some very positive reviews, and I think they're gonna have another workshop with some of the funding that they still have this summer and resubmit it. And what we hope is that this might eventually lead to the establishment of a center at more like the $3 to $5 million a year funding from NSF. So I wanted to mention our strategic plan, which is, it takes a long time to develop a strategic plan, it turns out. So it is in the final stages of approval. Many of you may recall that you've been asked for input on this multiple times. It went out to all of the Coast members for input and feedback. It went to the campus representatives. It was approved by the executive committee. It was approved by the president's council. It went to the chancellor's office. It came back. We did some revisions. And I think where it is, it's on my laptop, and you need to make some final revisions and then send it back to the chancellor for review and hopefully approval. Some of the things that it calls for that are newer activities, I mean, it calls for us to continue a lot of the things that we've been doing that I think we're doing really well with funding faculty and students in a variety of different ways. It calls for us to do a few things that I want to draw your attention to that regard amplifying the success. So all of you are out there doing all kinds of things, and we don't know about them. So sometimes we know about successes that you've had if it's directly related to funding that Coast provided. You know, we're always following up with you asking, did you get a grant out of this? Did you publish a paper? You're doing tons of other stuff, publishing papers and getting awards that we don't necessarily know about because we didn't have a direct hand in it, but it's still the overall footprint of what faculty in the CSU affiliated with Coast are doing. So we want to know about your news. Anytime you or your students are in the news, if you're contacted by your campus public affairs, if you're contacted by a local media outlet, if your student wins an award at a conference and there's even just a little paragraph online about it. You know, Chris Lowe is on NPR usually once a week talking about sharks down here. So we want to know. The other thing that we're working on, that we're making progress on, is a list of all your publications, so that we will also be able to say, you know, Coast faculty, which is just faculty affiliated with Coast, in the last year published 400 articles in peer-reviewed scientific journals, or maybe it's 600, I'm not sure. And we're also making efforts to inventory the grant and contract activity that you are all engaged in. So again, it's not just the grant and contract activity that results directly from Coast funding, but as Dr. Rahman was saying, in 2015-16, the CSU had, I believe it was $579 million in grant and contract activity. We want to articulate how much of that was brought in by Coast faculty. We want to be able to say that. And we want to, as we've been talking about, then take all of this information that the faculty have been researching and help communicate that to people in the legislature, in agencies, in DC, local government, local communities, nonprofits, and help inform decision. So, I just want to draw your attention again to this news thing, because this has been kind of a tough nut to crack. I know you don't all get out of bed every morning and think, I gotta go tell Krista about what happened yesterday. But we wish you would. So, also, you may have noticed we got our website overhauled last year, and on the home page, we focus on CSU marine and coastal related news. So we're always looking for news stories. And at the bottom of the page, if you scroll down, this was suggested, I think, 2 years ago, is the way that would be really easy. If there's something online, so we're not writing the content, it has to exist, but if there's something online about you or your students that you think is related to Coast, all you have to do is go here, paste in the URL and your email address, and hit submit, and we will get it. And then we take that material, we go through it, a lot of it we put on our website, we put it on social media, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we have quite a few followers for an academic enterprise. So I really want to encourage you to try to think about this. Anytime there's something online, we're really, really hoping to get more engagement with this. Briefly, I want to talk about a new project that we're involved in that we call the Scholars in Training Program. So this is a new research opportunity funded through a Department of Education Hispanic Serving STEM and Articulation Award to CSU Monterey Bay, where Coast is administratively headquartered, and it is specifically reserved for first and second year undergraduate students. So we know, how many students drop out of STEM degrees. They either drop out of the university altogether or they switch to a different major. We know that the first 2 years are the most critical time in their undergraduate career, particularly for underrepresented minority, low-income, and first-generation students. So we need to engage them early on. What we've designed is a program where we're going to run this on a pilot scale with Monterey Bay and Moss Landing to demonstrate proof of concept. So the first and the second year undergrads will assist Moss Landing graduate students with their thesis research. So first and second year undergraduates are probably not ready to conduct their own independent research. However, there's no reason that they can't help with a research project that someone else is developing. And I thought it was interesting what the chancellor said this morning, that for a lot of these students, they're going to a campus, maybe a really big campus that is overwhelming. And by being part of a research group, there's a lab, there's a set of grad students, there's a small group of people that they can identify with. And research has also shown that that social net, in addition to high impact practices for their own educational purpose, that social net can help students stay in STEM degrees and finish. So for many of them, this is going to be their first opportunity for hands-on research. And if they complete this, then the program provides them funding in their third or fourth year to conduct their own independent research. The students get money to do research. They also get stipends. One of the reasons that's important is because, in the CSU, a number of our students are here on financial aid. We need to give students income, like compensation for working in the lab. Otherwise, what you get are students who can afford to volunteer their time, and we know that that leads to less diversity. So this provides stipends for students who are both the undergrads and the mentors, provides a tiered approach where they can participate in this program for multiple years, and we're trying this first in Monterey Bay and Moss Landing because they're so close geographically, and then hopefully this will obviously succeed, and we would like to expand this out and make this available throughout the system. So this is something I'm particularly excited about. Before I turn it over to Amy and James, I also want to say that Jen, our program assistant, is unfortunately leaving us. Tomorrow's her last day. She's going to pursue a different path, more in science education and communication. So congratulate Jen. But we will be replacing her because Coast has really grown over the last few years. I mean, when Coast started, I think I worked on this half-time. We now have me and Beth full-time. We have Jen, and we just brought Amy James is helping through faculty mechanisms. So we're going to replace Jen. So I'm putting this as a call out to all of you. We're looking to hire a new person at 20 to 24 hours a week. Ideally, they will be based at CSUMB physically. It's somewhat administrative in nature. You know, it's writing letters and keeping track of data and helping organize meetings. We need someone who's detail-oriented, very adaptable. We work on any number of different things and put out multiple fires on any given day. And we also do a lot of writing, either for the website or letters. We need someone with excellent written and verbal skills. I think that we're going to begin the formal recruiting process in the next 2 weeks, so look for that. It'll be on the Coast website. But we're also desperate to get someone in through a temporary hiring process by May 1st. So I just want to put this out there. You know, if you have any students, we're particularly interested, I think, in hiring either a recent graduate, you know, someone who's graduating from undergrad this spring, or a grad student who's wrapping up and doesn't quite know what they're going to do. Let us know. So I kept referring to informing decision making and policy development. So in order to, this is something Coast has wanted to do since its inception, and I think we've always just been limited by personnel.